Hey guys, we're back here on the bonus round from GDC Next with Michael Pachter, Jason Rubin, and Seamus Blackley. We had an awesome discussion last week about Sony and the state of the console business. This week, let's turn to the other platform that's going to launch next week, which will be Xbox One from Microsoft. And what a year they've had. As you mentioned, Jason, when we saw you at E3, we were talking about the challenges Microsoft has faced overall this year. Seamus, let me start with you, since you obviously have a deep link to sort of the Xbox heritage. You've sort of watched this all from a distance, I think, this year. How do you feel about the Xbox One and where Microsoft is at with the system?
Is it okay if I call it Xbone on the air?
Yes, you can go Xbone. The
The
internet will love you for that.
It was a weird thing for me to watch them, do that initial press, because I had when the heat was on me to stand up in front and represent the thing, I had a PowerPoint of things you couldn't say.
Right.
And Don Matrick essentially took that PowerPoint and just read it as their presentation, like everything that it was totally illegal to say.
What were some of those things you weren't supposed to say?
Well, listen, I think that there's a lot of merit to the platform message that he had and the integration of content and all that stuff. We've seen it work really well with Netflix and other streaming video services and content services on consoles. It's been awesome. It's a good business, okay? But fundamentally, the reason people buy consoles is because they're gamers and they want to play awesome games and they want to feel really good about it and they want to feel like you give a shit about them. Yep. They want to feel like you give a shit about giving them good games, okay? And so if you're running the platform, you have to look at them and say, I am going to make awesome games for you. You are the most important thing in the world to me. And instead what Microsoft said was, thanks guys for getting this brand where it is. Now we're taking over and it's going to be about streaming football. Right. And people were like, it felt bad. I'm not the most important thing anymore because they are the most important.
So what is your you don't talk about other things? What was the PowerPoint saying? Don't talk about other things but games?
The PowerPoint said, talk about the fact that this entire business exists to make awesome games, which it did. And anytime we saw internally it not being about that, somebody, most often Uncle Seamus, threw a fit.
Right.
And it produced a culture, which produced a platform that was all about the games. And we had a steep gradient to climb. In 2001 or 2000 or 1999, we would go around and say Microsoft is going to make a console, and then after 10 minutes when the laughing died down, and when the jokes about blue screen of death died down, and when the jokes about running Excel spreadsheets on your console died down, we would talk about the plan, and the plan worked, right? But there was a really adverse gradient that we had to climb up to convince people that we were going to make a credible game console. Now, in retrospect, it seems obvious, but it wasn't so obvious then. And in many ways, with that presentation, Microsoft put themselves in that same hole again. And it was just extremely bizarre personally for me to watch. I was reaching out of the TV no, don't say that. Yeah, but then, as Jason predicted, they turned it around. They changed the messaging, they changed the policies, and they got a lot of that back. They remembered that the most important people in the world were gamers, and they talked to those people.
And they've still, since E3 sort of been trying to climb out of that hole. I saw even today, the day we're taping it, they're giving away free Xbox Ones to some of their fans on the internet. And stuff
I don't
you
think
mean Xbox?
Having dealt with Microsoft,
yes,
behind the scenes, they were absolutely clear at all times that it was about the gamer.
Right.
They had spent so much time and so much energy walking down the road of what was coming next, and had gotten themselves so excited about what was coming next, that they forgot to then remind the world, who hadn't been part of all their meetings, that indeed it was the gamer that made sense. So I always understood the message they were trying to make. Right. They utterly flubbed that message. And as a result, they had to step back. Right? They had to step off that message.
Because there is, a lot of innovative
There's
thinking.
an interesting thing, actually, that a friend of mine said. He said, yeah, Microsoft spent all those billions of dollars to make the new console, for it not to play games. Duh, what are people thinking? But as Jason says, you have to tell people that. You have to say, this is what we're doing.
Well, and there's a lot of innovative thinking, I think, in that system. Compared to PlayStation 4, which is a great game system. A lot of the stuff, and I've played it with, the switching between TV and games. That works, and it's interesting, and there's a lot of, deep thinking about sort of that platform, right? The software and services. But does that matter to gamers, Michael?
Microsoft made a mistake in determining how we were going to access those non-game services.
Right.
I don't think anybody is against getting more. So even if you buy the console, play games, it's not going to upset you that you can also watch Netflix. Right? No, it's
I don't want this.
Well, the features, if it's complicated, it might bother you. But if you have access to football, no one's going to say, oh, it gets football? Fuck that, I'm not going to buy an Xbox. They'll say, oh, okay, somebody in my family might watch it. So I get the concept. What Microsoft made a mistake doing was saying, the way you're going to access this is with Kinect.
Right.
Rather than with your touchscreen device, which I think Microsoft, when they launched Kinect, it never occurred to them every household that buys an Xbox or a console is going to have a touchscreen device that's connected to the internet.
Right.
So they said, we're going to dictate to you that you're going to use Kinect, and we're going to let you pay for it. You're going to pay $100 more. And when I talked to them post E3, I mean, I literally had lunch with them, you did too, that same day, a couple months ago. I said to them, you really have to convince people it's worth $100 for Kinect. And the three-headed monster that runs Microsoft now, they're like, no, that's not what you're paying for. You're paying for the features and functionality. And I said, look, guys, I know that's the company message. Yeah. The gamer goes, I'm getting this stuff in the box that I don't think I need or want, and you're asking me to pay $100 for it.
Yeah, I think
and so
Kinect is the mistake.
So I think
it's Kinect their Blu-ray.
It's the mistake they can't walk off of.
Right, it is. It's their Blu-ray. So I think the solution to the problem is jettison Kinect, because the box totally works with smart glass, every smart glass. Right. So jettison Kinect, get it the fuck out of the box, and lower the price by $100. And then we're having a completely different conversation about how, wow, they're both $400. What a great deal. They both do a whole lot of cool stuff. They both have great games. But instead, the rest of the next 30 minutes of this bonus round are going to be dedicated to why Microsoft screwed up by packing Kinect in the box. So the answer to your question is, I think gamers would embrace all the other features and functionality if they didn't have to pay more for it. Well, but they say $100 for football. I don't want football.
You got to remember, though. I mean, I think that the subtext here that we got to point out, because we live in this all day long, we have lived in it all day long, is that it's not so simple to run one of these divisions of a company, to run the PlayStation division, run Xbox division. And you can't have the simple marketing message that you want. You have to address your investors. You have to address the internal politics, and it is complicated. Why is the Kinect in there? There's a lot of internal pressure to keep the Kinect in there because there is a huge investment in the Kinect, and maybe those guys aren't around anymore. But the legacy of that debt, politically, economically, is still around, and it takes an incredibly deft manager.
It'll drag the company
down.
Right,
and
to
Microsoft get around
now
that.
has a chance to just jettison all of that because they are rejiggering
I think
everybody.
Come March, April, if Sony's way ahead, if Sony's sold through 6 million and Microsoft sold through 3 million, they're going to reconsider Kinect.
I'd be interested
if they're neck and neck, then it might go to next Christmas.
Right after the announcement, there were all the problems they had. Right, they were not going to allow used games in a certain fashion. They were not going to allow indie games in the same way Sony was. All of those things were easy changes. So within 48 hours, they had changed half of them, and within a couple of weeks, they had changed the rest. Kinect's not as easy, because everything they had done up until that point planned on Kinect being in the box. It's the hardest one for them to say, mea culpa, we're going to take it out of the box. Well, it's really, really hard.
Yeah, there's nothing that launch that really uses it.
There was a technique that we exactly used to get Xbox off the ground, and that technique was intentionally telling the public about stuff and getting a huge reaction, and then there is no argument internally, right? And so in the case of their announcement, it was easy. I'm sure there was a lot of dissension within Microsoft about those policies, right? And I'm sure that there was some sort of fiat that was thrown down about how those are going to be the policies because we have to protect our business and right? And people who know gamers are like, oh my God, you're going to explode a hand grenade in your hand if you say that. And they did. But and all that feedback came, and then suddenly the argument internally is easily, right? The Kinect, it's a little bit of a different thing. Like, unless there's a huge outrage about the Kinect, then
so
it's
the
a subtle
solution
thing.
is cut the price $100 and eat the cost of Kinect and still pack it in the box.
And Microsoft
they can do
that.
that.
No,
and so I
they
talked
can
to
do it, and also the financial pain might cause.
So I talked to the
ease out
three-headed
of the
monster.
package.
I talked to the three-head guys about an alternative to that, because I said you got to give the
Three-headed
consumer $100 of value, and they said, so what would you suggest? And I go, well, throwing a game is easy, but I said, give them a year of Xbox Live Gold, and you should have seen their faces like, why would we do that? They'll pay us. And I go, what percentage of Xbox 360 owners are paying members Xbox Live Gold?
Oh, but
1 out of 3.
This is an interesting moment because, certainly you, and increasingly me, because I have a mobile games company now, we think about installed copies of whatever it is versus how much money you're going to get paid by the audience, and you make that balance, right? This is a new way of thinking to a lot of guys who are from the console business, and frankly, Microsoft and Sony are both in a lot of trouble because it's a new way of thinking from a corporate standpoint. So that trade-off, which to the CEO of Supercell would seem like a no-brainer.
Right.
Get it out there. Yeah, because you know what? We're going to give them more services and more games and a bigger
And
install
you'll
base
get
and make more money.
100% conversion
Nobody
rate.
would ever push back against that. So I guess in the year 2013, to have somebody say, you know, why would we give it away just in order to increase the installed base? You know, seems a little bit arcane, but again, you have to remember, that this is a radically new way of thinking. We think about it all day long, but it's really only a couple of years that it's been viable.
All right, guys, hold that thought. We're going to be right back here on the bonus round.